In the shadow of the Whispering Mountains, where ancient oaks bent the gnarled fingers towards forgotten stars, there lived a young man named Omar. His grandfather had been the village's most revered storyteller, a keeper of secrets that danced between truth and legend. When the old man passed beneath the harvest moon, he left behind little more than dust and memories, save for one curious inheritance. The bag arrived on Omar's doorstep 3 days after the funeral, carried by a hooded merchant who spoke not a word. It was fashioned from leather so dark it seemed to swallow light, its surface worn smooth by countless hands. The brass buckles bore symbols that shifted when looked upon directly, as if the metal itself held restless dreams. Omar's fingers trembled as he lifted the bag. It felt impossibly light, yet somehow substantial, like holding captured wind. Inside, his hand found nothing but empty space, though the bag's depths seemed to stretch far beyond its modest appearance. The first test came that very evening. Magnus the Mighty, the village's self-proclaimed champion, had been terrorizing the marketplace for wheat. His massive frame cast shadows that made children scatter like autumn leaves, and his voice boomed demands for tribute from every merchant and tradesman. This night, he stood before Omar's humble cottage, fists like hammers at his sides. "You're the storyteller's grandson," Magnus declared, his words carrying the weight of stone. "Your grandfather owed me respect. Now that debt passes to you." Omar's heart hammered against his ribs. He had no strength to match this giant, no sword to defend himself. Yet as his fingers brushed the mysterious bag, something stirred within its depths. Not an object, a whisper of possibility. The bag seemed to pulse with quiet warmth. Omar reached inside, his mind racing with desperate thoughts. What he needed was not a weapon, but wisdom. As his fingers closed around something smooth and cool, he felt the first flutter of understanding. He withdrew a simple copper mirror, no larger than his palm. Its surface gleamed like still water under moonlight. Magnus laughed, a sound like breaking timber. "A mirror, you think to blind me with reflections, boy." But Omar had already begun to move. He angled the mirror carefully, catching the light from the oil lamps that lined the village square. Instead of directing the beam at Magnus, he cast it onto the ground between them, creating a pool of dancing light. "Look closely, Magnus, see how the light moves." The giant's eyes followed the shifting patterns, and something remarkable happened. The reflected light began to tell a story, shadows and brightness weaving together like living tapestry. In the dancing illumination, Magnus saw himself as a child, small and frightened, hiding from bullies who mocked his size. He saw his father's disappointed face, his mother's worried tears. He saw the loneliness that had hardened into anger, the fear that had grown into cruelty. The mirror showed truth, not flattery. It revealed the boy who had been hurt, who had decided that strength was the only shield against the world's sharp edges. Magnus's fist slowly unclenched, the rage drained from his face like water from a cracked vessel. When he looked up at Omar, his eyes held not fury, but recognition. "I remember now," he whispered. "I remember why I became strong." The giant turned and walked away, his footsteps no longer shaking the earth. In the days that followed, he became the village's protector rather than its tormentor, using his strength to help rather than harm. Word of Omar's strange gift spread like ripples across still water. Soon, others came seeking his help. There was Alara the merchant, whose rival had been spreading lies about her goods. From the bag, Omar drew a silver bell that rang only when truth was spoken. At the market square, he invited both merchants to stake their claims. When Alara's rival opened his mouth to speak his falsehoods, the bell remained silent. When Alara spoke honestly about her wares, the bell sang with crystal clarity. The truth became undeniable, and the honest merchant's reputation was restored. Then came Tobias the farmer, whose crops had been failing for 3 seasons. The bag offered Omar a handful of what looked like ordinary seeds, but when planted, they grew into plants that thrived in the poorest soil. Yet the true magic wasn't in the seeds themselves, it was in the knowledge they carried. As Tobias tended them, he learned to read the subtle signs of earth and weather, to understand what his land truly needed. The bag had given him not just good crops, but wisdom about the art of growing. Each challenge brought new understanding. The bag responded not to greed or desperation, but to genuine need paired with clever thinking. When Omar reached into its depths with selfish intent, his fingers found only emptiness. But when he approached each problem with curiosity and compassion, the bag revealed tools that perfectly matched the situation. The blacksmith's daughter, born mute, received a pen that wrote in colors only she could see, allowing her to communicate in ways more beautiful than words. The village judge, struggling with a case where truth seemed impossible to discern, was given a set of scales that weighed intentions rather than gold. But the bag's greatest test came when winter's grip tightened around the village like a cruel fist. The river that sustained the community had frozen solid, trapping the fish that fed the people and blocking the flow of fresh water. Desperate villagers gathered around Omar's cottage, their faces gaunt with hunger and worry. Children cried from thirst while their parents stared at the unyielding ice with helpless eyes. Omar approached the bag with a heavy heart. This was no simple dispute or personal problem. This was a crisis that threatened every life in the village. His fingers searched the depths, seeking something, anything, that might help. For long moments, he found nothing. The bag seemed empty, indifferent to the suffering around him. Doubt crept into his mind like winter wind through cracked walls. Perhaps the bag's magic had limits. Perhaps some problems were too great for cleverness to solve. Then he felt it, not an object, but a sensation. A warmth that spread from his fingertips through his entire being. The bag was showing him something, but not through his hands. It was opening his eyes to what was already there. Omar looked at the frozen river with new understanding. He saw how the ice formed, how it trapped the water beneath in perfect stillness. He noticed how the morning sun struck the surface at just the right angle, creating tiny points of heat that never quite managed to break through. The bag had given him no tool, it had given him insight. Omar gathered the villagers and explained his plan. They would work together, using mirrors and polished metal to focus the sun's rays onto specific points along the river. Not to melt the entire surface, that would be impossible, but to create small channels that would grow and connect, like veins carrying life through the frozen landscape. It took 3 days of patient work. The villagers positioned their mirrors with mathematical precision, adjusting angles as the sun moved across the sky. Slowly, surely, thin streams of water began to flow. The channels widened, connected, and soon the river lived again. But the true miracle wasn't the melting ice, it was the way the community had come together. The bag had shown Omar that some problems required not individual brilliance, but collective wisdom. The greatest magic was not in mysterious objects, but in the bonds between people working toward a common goal. As spring returned to the village, Omar made a discovery that changed everything he thought he knew about his inheritance. While cleaning his grandfather's cottage, he found an old journal hidden beneath the loose floorboard. The pages were filled with his grandfather's careful handwriting, documenting years of observation and experimentation. The truth was revealed in faded ink and gentle words. The bag had never been magical at all. It was simply a well-crafted leather satchel, beautiful but ordinary. The real magic had been in Omar's mind, his ability to think clearly under pressure, to see problems from new angles, to find creative solutions that others missed. His grandfather had recognized this gift in the young man and had created an elaborate illusion to help Omar discover his own potential. The hooded merchant had been the village's retired actor, paid to deliver the bag with mysterious ceremony. The symbols on the buckles were clever craftsmanship, designed to shift in changing light. But the objects that had appeared in the bag, where had they come from? Omar read on and found his answer. His grandfather had spent years collecting simple items and hiding them throughout the village. The mirror, the bell, the seeds, all carefully placed where Omar would find them when his subconscious mind guided his searching hands. The old man had studied his grandson's nature so thoroughly that he could predict exactly what Omar would reach for in any given situation. Yet even this revelation carried a deeper truth. The bag's magic hadn't been in providing mystical tools, it had been in forcing Omar to trust his own instincts, to believe that solutions existed if only he looked hard enough. The confidence that came from believing in the bag's power had freed his mind to work at its highest level. Omar sat in his grandfather's chair, the ordinary bag resting in his lap, and began to laugh. The sound started as a chuckle but grew into something rich and full, not mockery, but appreciation for the most elaborate and loving trick ever played. His grandfather had given him exactly what he needed, not magic but faith in his own abilities. The bag had been a mirror of sorts, reflecting back the intelligence and creativity that had been within Omar all along. From that day forward, Omar kept the bag but never again reached into its depths seeking solutions. Instead, he reached into his own mind, his own heart, his own carefully cultivated wisdom. He became the village's problem solver not because he possessed magical tools, but because he had learned to think clearly and act with compassion. The bag sat on his shelf, a reminder that the greatest magic lives not in mystical objects, but in the boundless potential of the human mind. When villagers came seeking help, Omar would touch the bag briefly, not to draw power from it, but to remember his grandfather's final lesson. Intelligence paired with kindness could overcome any obstacle. Clever thinking guided by compassion could solve any problem. The true magic was not in having the right tools, but in becoming the right person to use whatever tools were at hand. Years passed, and Omar grew old in his turn. His hair silvered like moonlight on water, and his eyes held the depth that comes from a lifetime of learning. When young people came to him seeking wisdom, he would tell them stories, not of magic bags and mystical objects, but of the power that lives within every thinking mind. He never revealed the truth about the bag's ordinary nature. Some secrets, he understood, were more valuable as mysteries than as facts. The bag had given him a gift more precious than any genuine magic: the unshakable belief that intelligence and creativity could triumph over brute force and blind luck. And so the bag remained, waiting on its shelf, ready to inspire the next generation of problem solvers. Not through magic, but through the far more powerful force of human ingenuity awakened by love and guided by wisdom. In the end, Omar's grandfather had been right about everything. The bag was indeed magical, not because it contained supernatural power, but because it contained something far more valuable: the catalyst for a young man's journey toward becoming his truest, most capable self. The whispering mountains still cast their ancient shadows over the village, and the oaks still bent the gnarled fingers toward the stars. But now those shadows held not mystery, but promise. For in every challenge that arose, in every problem that seemed impossible, the people remembered Omar's example. They learned to reach not for magical solutions, but for the magic that lives within the human heart when it chooses wisdom over strength, creativity over force, and understanding over ignorance. The bag of endless tricks had taught them all the greatest trick of all: that the most powerful magic is the courage to think clearly, act kindly, and trust in the boundless potential that lies sleeping in every soul, waiting only for the right moment to awaken and transform the world.